We have data and
Okay, let's get started. Sorry for the delay. We have to get our electronics in order here. Welcome to the University of Tennessee Nuclear Engineering Department Seminar Series. Our speaker today is Mr. Jack Woodard, who is Executive Vice President of the Southern Nuclear Operating Company. Jack has over 31 years of experience in the nuclear business. He spent 18 years at the Farley Nuclear Plant, starting out as a new engineer and rising all through the ranks and becoming the plant manager. He's now the liaison for a couple of universities in the Southeast, one of which is the University of Tennessee. His topic today is energy and employment. We're glad he's here. Welcome, Jack. You've got the floor.
Well, I'm really excited to be here, and because I was born and raised around here, and about 100 miles west of here, so it's a really good opportunity to kind of come home. I didn't get a chance to go to school at the University of Tennessee because my father was in the military, and we were kind of all over the world, but I always wanted to. It's a pleasure to be with you. I have two purposes in being here. Number one, to provide you information that may help you in achieving employment and maintaining employment. It's easier to get employment than it is to maintain it, both from the point of view of the employer as well as the employee. Because from the employee's point of view, you certainly want to be happy in your new job, and from the employer's point of view, he wants the same thing. And if you don't achieve that, if you don't find what you're looking for, there's problems. And so I want to be able to get through this and tell you a lot of things, but in the end, talk about the challenges of getting a new job and maintaining a new job outside the academic environment. And so I'd like to do that for you. What I'm interested for me, is recruiting new engineers, either as summer students, summer interns, co-op students, or for permanent employment. Most of our permanent employment comes from engineers right out of school who've held positions as co-ops or summer interns, or we also do the same thing at Christmas. So that's my interest. It's in two areas, and I hope it's helpful to you. And I'm going to go through this, and I want to talk about Southern Company that I work for. I want to talk about its core business in the Southeast. I want to talk about its national business across the United States and its international business global. So you'll have some feeling for what kind of company we are and what businesses we're in today compared to years in the past. And also tell you about what businesses we're going to be in the future, which I think you'll find interesting. Second thing I want to talk about is Southern Nuclear, the nuclear generation part of the business, which is responsible for the operation of plants Farley, Hatch, and Vogtle. And there are two units at each of those three sites. And those units are what I am principally responsible for. Oh, I'm going to insert a little last-minute thing in here that I think is kind of spicy, but it's related to all of it, and that's what's happening in California. And I hope you'll participate with me. And as I go through here, I'll ask you questions, and there are no wrong answers. So be a good straight man and volunteer, and particularly you guys on the back row back there. I know y'all are going to just ask all sorts of inspiring questions. So we'll have a little fun. But I want to talk about what's going on in California, and I'm going to ask you what went wrong in California. I guess everybody knows something happened in California. No, sir?
Oh, you were asking us? My answer would be that a lot of groups try to block the construction of power plants. I know that one of the nuclear plants that was built was supposed to cost $500 million. It took 3 years. It took $6 billion, and I believe 12 years. So it cost 12 times as much as it was supposed to cost, and over 4 times as long. And in California, since 1990, their electricity production capacity has fallen by approximately 5%, and their demand has increased by a little over 25%. And then they had outages, and that pushed that narrow margin just too narrow.
Yep. And on the surface, a lack of generation is what most people think is basically what went wrong in California. But if you go ask the head of the utility company in California, he will give you a different answer. And we'll get to that at the end. And I think you're going to be amazed at all of the different things that had to go wrong for that situation to exist. You're right about the generation. That was one piece of it. But on the surface, most people think that's basically it, except for the general public. What do they think? Do they think there's a lack of generation in California? 60% of the people who live in California believe there's no lack of generation in California. They think all this is a big hoax.
That's because they live in California.
Everything's a big hoax. That's a good answer. All right, Southern Company. We're the largest producer of electricity in the United States. That's including our core business, our national business, and our international business. But we will not be the largest producer of power in the United States on April the 2nd. Does anybody know why? Excuse me? Merger, it's actually kind of the opposite of that. We are going to spin off our national and international business. And I want to tell you a little bit about that because we have worked so hard to develop that business over the past 5 to 7 years, and then now we're going to spin it off as a separate business, and it will actually be a competitor of Southern Company. And I know that may not make much sense to you, and I'll try to explain it to you in a few minutes. Because you're going to see a lot more of mergers, acquisitions, spin-offs in the future for companies than you've ever seen before, particularly utility-type companies. And there have been a lot of them in the past 6 years. Our rates are good. We've been given dividends since 1948, every quarter, not missed a quarter. And how does that impress investors? It's a loaded question. Some of them are impressed, and some of them aren't. Which ones are? Well, retirees, pension funds really go for Southern Company, except they dumped us, a lot of our stock, when we started developing this national and international business. Why so?
You want to retain a lot of that dividend money to develop your business overseas. And maybe they're afraid about higher risk.
Part of it you're right, part of it you're not. We kept paying the dividend. But they were afraid of the risk. Because the rest of the national and international business was a high-cap, high-growth type business with higher risk. The core business remained a low-growth, dividend-paying business. And so what happened is the people who were interested in high-cap, high-growth, which was the predominant interest, the past 8 years until last year, they didn't want Southern Company stock. They wanted to take risk, particularly high-tech type risk, or at least high-tech's way over here in risk, but you take your Walmarts, Home Depot, people like that, they're your high-cap, high-growth that are kind of moderate to high risk as opposed to high technology type stuff. But the same group of people that wanted higher risks did not necessarily want a conservative company with dividends. And if you think about your own personal investment portfolio, you might want to mix it up, right? Some high tech, some high cap, high growth, and some stable, maybe even bonds. But we almost never go out and buy a single company that offers both, like Southern Company has a piece that's conservative and a piece that's moderate risk. But investors don't think that way. They think incrementally. So the whole idea of spinning off this company we've built is so that you will benefit who? Stockholders. And basically we're going to spin off this national and international business and let it be a high-cap, high-growth company, and Southern Company is going to be a moderate growth company. And for every person that has a share of Southern Company stock, they will get 4/10 of a share of this new company called Marant. Mirant. And we'll take a look at that a little closer. This is our core business in the red here in the wholesale and retail area, and then there's states around our core business. Our business in the core area for Southern Company, which we will go back to solely on April the 2nd, is regulated. But yet we have parts of our company that are not regulated. What would you think our growth would be in the regulated area if we just focused on that % per year? It's like 2, okay? And our goal is to grow the company that's going to exist on April the 2nd by 5% per year. Now, how are we going to come up with 2.5% to 3% growth beyond that? The answer is the biggest part of it's going to come from Southern Power Company. It's a separate power company that deals in wholesale energy. And we will be selling competitively in the core business area, wholesale, not regulated, and we will sell in these surrounding states of the Carolinas, Tennessee, Florida, and so on. And we'll be bidding against other established companies for that generation. But it'll be a separate company that will not be regulated. And fact is, it will even bid in Georgia Power, Alabama Power, Gulf, Mississippi. In our core business, it will bid against the established utility, which is us. So we'll have one subsidiary bidding against a regulated part of our business for the generation. And that's how we hope to grow the business by 5% as opposed to 2%. That's the biggest part. Let's talk a minute about our national and international business we're going to spin off, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. It represents about 25 to 30% of our earnings. So what's going to happen to our stock price when we spin this off? We make the distribution the 2nd of April. It's going to go down because your earnings are going to go down with what's left. But the whole concept is you spin this business off, stock owners will own shares of stock in both companies, and you will have one company that appeals more to the high cap, high growth, the Mirant, which they're going to grow in the 20% range, 15 to 20% range. And then you'll have the Southern Company growing in the 5% range that will appeal to the paying dividend receiving investors. So the idea is you will appeal more to both sets of people separately than you will together. So that basically the worth of the stock separated will hopefully be worth more than the stock together. Because typically your price to earnings ratio for a very conservative company may be something like 16, 14, 12, somewhere in that range. But your price to earnings ratio for a high cap, high growth company might be what? Not a high tech, but it's more like 30, 40, 20, 30, 40, something like that. So if you separate the companies, hopefully the stock will be worth more than it was together. And I think as we approach April the 2nd, we're seeing Southern Company stock value go up because it represents the Mirant Company as well as Southern Company. This shows you the locations that we have internationally. We have generation, natural gas assets, and we also broker electricity. We sell electricity nationally and internationally, meaning you buy it and sell it. And the thing that gives you strength in marketing electricity as a commodity is you must own some generation to back up what you do. If you don't, you're in for a huge gamble, and there have been companies who've gone bankrupt in peak periods buying and selling electricity. These are the locations of the national business, and that's the location of where we have generation or we're building generation. We also have some natural gas assets. And again, this company, Mirant, will be spun off and distributed. The stock will be distributed on the 2nd of April. The other subsidiaries in Southern Company are, of course, Southern Nuclear, our company that runs the 6 nuclear units in Georgia and Alabama. Southern Company Energy Solutions, they market different energy products, and hopefully that will be the source of a significant part of the 5% growth that we're trying to grow each year. Southern Company Services, anyone familiar with Southern Services? You probably are. That's our architect engineer. They provide the engineering services for all of the fossil plants, nuclear plants, hydro plants, and other ventures in Southern Company. Then we have Southern Link, and this is our wireless telecommunications company. We provide telephone service. It's basically a two-way radio and a cellular phone all in one. And businesses really enjoy this kind of communication. And I think last year was the first year this company made a profit, and it's growing. So that, again, will be part of our growth mechanism to go beyond 2% growth. The Southern Power Company will be the bulk of what gets us our growth above the normal growth of the core business area. We're looking at for something like $100 million a year in revenue. Here are the locations of our plants. Plants Farley in Alabama, Hatch in Vidalia, Georgia, and Vogel in Augusta, Georgia. Farley is in the southeast part of the state on the Chattahoochee River near Panama City and near a lot of very nice places to live. They have a lot of lakes and water and a good climate. Actually, all of our plants are located in very desirable places to live. You're not going to find the ballet in Vidalia, Georgia, though. I'll tell you that right now. So
You'll find it in Augusta.
You'll find it in Augusta, and you may not find it in Dothan, Alabama. It may come through now and then with a traveling troupe or something, but you'll find it in Augusta. Our total number of employees is about 3,000, and what's interesting, I sat here and went through this, and I was here 2 years ago. I don't know, were any of you here 2 years ago? Yeah. Well, thanks for coming back. It wasn't too bad, was it? But, and I was comparing all the change that had taken place since I was here 2 years ago, and it's just been phenomenal, the amount of change that's taken place in business, in our business, and in our employment in the past 2 years. But this slide said something like 3,800 employees 2 years ago. We've had tremendous turnover as well as new employees. And we've been hiring like 30 new engineers every year, not to mention the co-ops and summer students. This would be permanent employees. Of course, most of our permanent engineers come from those ranks. The kinds of degrees that we're interested in, let's talk about that a minute. That's always a great source of heated debate when you talk to Professor Dodds, and I tell him I'm looking for people who know how to do mechanical and electrical engineering, and he gets all fired up. So don't say that when you go in there. So I'm not going to say that while I'm in here, but I'll talk around it. Okay, we'll get to it. It's we actually have one of our engineers is an agricultural engineer from that's the only engineering degree that the University of Georgia offers, I believe. Maybe different now, but that was true in the past. And but it happens that this engineer is the executive he's the vice president over the Vogel project and was the plant manager for many years. So we're not locked into anything. Okay. Now I would say to you, if you're in nuclear engineering, you might want to think about taking some extra electives in mechanical or electrical. That'll give you some diversity that people may be looking for.
They already do.
And I know they already do. But even when you get more electives, you might think about where you want to work and take some electives in that area instead of taking golf or something, you know. And then when you go to interview, throw that up to them. Say, look, I had electives, and look what I took as my electives to broaden myself. And that will really speak for you, I think. I know how hard it is to take electives that are tough. I went to school one time, too, a long time ago. Actually, I went to school forever, so it seems. But we're obviously interested in nuclear engineering. I spend most of my time up here with you guys when I come up here. What are the challenges for nuclear for the future? This is the same overhead that I used in '98, but the explanations are different. They're a little bit different today than they were in '98 when I was up here. Let me skip the regulatory. I'm going to come back to that in a little more detail. But plant performance is a huge issue for us. And right now, our goals in Southern Nuclear are to have no power reductions or trips or shutdowns over equipment performance. That's a goal. So we're really going after equipment performance in these plants. And equipment performance has historically been a big contributor to losing generation. And they really get you during the summer and the winter and your peak periods when the price of electricity is out the roof. Another goal is that we don't want to have any power reduction, shutdown from human performance. Getting on the wrong unit, the wrong train, the wrong piece of equipment, causing a power reduction or shutdown of the plant. It's the second big goal. Human performance is a huge issue for us. Our third goal in that area, in plant performance, is to have short refuelings. And right now our goal is to develop our refuelings in a 20 to 25 day period. There are plants who have 15 to 20 day refuelings these days. And we've been in the 20s one time. But the issue you run into this day and time when you get below 20 is you may have to take more risk at doing maintenance online than I'm wanting to take right now. You also are going to have to pour an awful lot of money into contingency planning if you're going to pull that off. And it may be more cost-effective right now to do them in the 20 to 25 day range as a goal as opposed to the 15 to 20 day. But I'm telling you, down the road, in several years, as the cost of electricity goes up, it's going to swing to be in the 15 to 20 day range for everybody instead of the 20 to 25 day range. And it's going to take new processes, new technology, new innovative ideas from people like you to make that happen. Workforce issues are in two categories. Aging workforce is a problem, and new employees are a problem in our business. And if you think about it, in the electric utility business, you have gone, most of us went for roughly 15 years when we were downsizing and didn't hire anybody. Think about that bubble of no people in this age group floating through your organization. And then all of a sudden you decide you got to hire. So you retire, an engineer with 40 years experience, and you hire one of you guys in, right? Is that a net gain? That is more than a loss of 40 years experience. I lost all his experience, and now I've got to help you. And is that a challenge? Absolutely. What do you think the biggest challenge we're putting in here? What if you're very, very far? You think about going to hold their arms out, tell you how much they love you, and come sit on my knee and let me tell you everything I know? Isn't that happen? You and I will have to work together to make that happen. There will be a large part of the workforce who resent new people coming in because maybe they're people, who didn't get picked for upper management or supervisory jobs. And they see new employees coming in and they say, gee, I've been here 20 years and I never made it in the management ranks, and they want me to mentor this new guy that's coming in. That's kind of tough. And that's what you run into when you haven't hired people for a long time. And you don't run into that if you continuously hire and turn over people and you have good demographics. You have good diversity of age, among other things, in the workforce. You don't run into that. People forget how to treat new people when they've gone a long period of time and they haven't hired. They kind of think that I came in with hard knocks and, boy, I'm going to give these guys hard knocks, and if they survive it, fine. If they don't, let them get out of here. And that will not work out. Absolutely will not work out. So it's a huge challenge on dealing with aging workforce and then having new employees come in and be integrated into your system. A lot of employers say, I have such a difficult time hiring really good engineers. I can get really good engineers from all over. I just can get, if I'll go out and work at it, I can get far more than I need. My challenge is helping them fit in to the work environment and convincing the rest of the workforce that our future depends on integrating you into the work environment. Materials is a major issue. Does anybody know a current example of how materials was a big issue? The nuclear power plant? Heard of the Indian Point 2 toothbrush? That's not long ago. Of the 104 nuclear power plants in the United States, 103 of them are online. That's sort of a milestone. we've historically seen a lot of them shut down. And the one that was shut down was Indian Point 2. How about VC Summer? Anybody know about that problem? They had a crack in the reactor coolant system pipe. It was actually in a well. And then 2 or 3 days ago, one of the Oconee units at Duke shut down, and they found in the head penetrations to the control rod drives there were 6 leaks, which is probably in weld areas. So aging nuclear power plants is a big challenge for the future. In the regulatory area, you're familiar with all these. We're loading spent nuclear fuel. Okay, Plant Hatch. First plant to load transportable canisters. New advanced technology. Stuff you can transport. All the rest of them in the U.S. are non-transportable. I don't know if you knew that. And we're getting ready to do the procurement and manufacture for dry cask storage at Farley. So 2 of our plant spent fuel pools are basically full, or will be shortly. License renewal, Plant Hatch, we expect their license renewal in the next year or so. Been working on that. Huge expense for that, but it basically will extend the plant life by 20 years. The original license is 40 years, and this will extend it 20 years. And then we're going to start up on Farley. Another big challenge is new plant development. There's more talk today about building new nuclear plants than ever before, and that talk has accelerated based on 2 things. What are those 2 things? Compared to when I was here in '98, some people whispered about it, okay? In '96, everybody said, don't even talk to me about it. And in '96, people were whispering about it a little bit. '98, and then today, there's a lot of heavy talk going on. What are the basic 2 reasons? There's really 3. Yes, sir?
Environmental pollution of other things.
Okay,
Other sources of power.
I kind of looked at it a little different than that.
Okay, I mean,
That's a
there's
subset.
the Rio Agreement, there's all this different stuff going on, and there's more pressure being brought to bear on the U.S. to reduce carbon emissions and various things.
You're right, but this is a guess what I'm thinking game. See? Anybody else got another guess at what I'm thinking?
California.
Gas prices. Who said gas prices? Thank you. What's happened to gas prices? We're going to look in a minute. Whew, out the roof, man. And 90% of the production costs for a combined cycle plant is fuel. The other thing that's happened is what? California. The other thing that opens the gates is we have a new administration. It's very energy friendly. So, and we've got environmental problems. So, the stage is set for new plant development, and there are 4 companies in the U.S. that are actively trying to explore the barriers to nuclear power generation and see if they're overcomable. Southern Company is one of those. Duke, Entergy is one. Exelon is one. This is a slide I used last time I was here, and I said this is what we need in the nuclear business to make it more competitive and make it more viable, and we have made huge progress on all those fronts. Most of the plants now run far more competitively than ever before, and a lot of the survival of the fittest, where the good guys buy the bad guys, has happened. Mergers, acquisitions, and the people who do real well buy those who aren't doing well, and whammo, they get well, and very quickly from a business point of view. So the performance of nuclear power has gone up markedly. And supportive government action, I don't know if you study regulations in the government and nuclear, but the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's new oversight process is one of the best things that ever happened to us. It freed us up. Instead of fighting with a regulator, we're actually more able now, looking at the new criteria, to focus on real issues in the plant and not so much arguing with the regulator over things that aren't significant to safety. Our opportunities in nuclear, they are environmental, they're economic, and they're fuel diversity. Those are the big areas that make nuclear terribly attractive. The Kyoto Agreement, and all this says is that the Kyoto Agreement says that we will get 7% below the 1990 emissions by the year 2050. That's that red line going through the middle, down here. Now, this, if you do business as usual, this will be your emissions in 2050, okay? If you do go heavy on gas and renewables, if you can afford it, you can get it down from there to there, the projection. If you build several hundred nuclear units around the world, like doubling what you already have, several hundred, like 300 or 400, you can get it down to there. And if you believe this, I'll buy you lunch. Demand-side management, which is basically doing without. So you can, we'll run factories at night and through the daytime. I don't buy it. It's going to go a long way before people do without. Cost. I hate to show busy slides, but I don't know any other way to show you this than this. This production cost is the cost of fuel, operations, and maintenance. It's your everyday cost of running a business. It does not include your house payment for the business. It does not include your depreciation. It does not include your decommissioning and that sort of thing. It's just the day-to-day cost. And if you look at it, this is gas up here. Looky. Now, the dotted lines, when I dot them, I'm giving you my guess because the official numbers aren't out yet. But I'm pretty close, okay? Gas went sky high on the average in 2000. It went up substantially here. And people were projecting it would just keep coming down here and here. It did, but it didn't, and it did, but it didn't. But it went very high up here. And if you look at coal, there's coal, and here's nuclear. And for the very first time, nuclear production costs went below coal. Why? Because the good guys fought the bad guys, and they could run like the other good guys. And the efficiency of the fleet of plants in the United States went up markedly. So the cents per kilowatt hour became very competitive to coal and far below gas. Now, let's look at the total cost. And this is a very confusing thing, and I'm going to point out just a couple of things. This is Vogel and total bus bar cost. That adds in your fuel, your operations and maintenance. It adds in your house payment, your decommissioning, depreciation. And this is Farley and Hatch here. Basically, this says, in 99, a new coal plant projection went from this value up to this value. And that probably went up because of adding on new environmental features. Okay, it's very substantial. If you look at new nuclear, the price went from here to here. And I'm not really sure why it went up. Probably just a reassessment of what it was really going to cost from a reality point of view. But it went up. But the most important thing is if you look at this one square here that's hard to see, that's combined cycle gas, which is what predominantly is being built in the U.S. And it went from here to here, meaning it was not cost competitive with nuclear, and now they're on top of each other. That is very important. So build a total bus bar cost from a gas plant is the same as a nuclear plant right now. If you built several nuclear plants, you can't build just one. Yes, sir. Southern Nuclear Company, that's our company. Those are our costs on the average are right in here. It shows you how we compare with new nuclear and new coal on a total bus bar cost basis. And the reason this curve does this is we accelerated the depreciation of Plant Vogel here, which means you wrote it off quicker so you can be profitable sooner. And the ratepayer pays for that. And he has incentives to pay for that. It's not like he's getting nailed. Now, I'll give you, any of you want this presentation, you can have it. You can just give Professor Dodge your email address and I'll send it to you. Let's talk about California for a minute. What went wrong in California? We already said we didn't have enough generation. Well, let me tell you, there were a whole lot more problems than that. And I just want to briefly review them because I want to make sure I have time to talk about the challenges you're going to run into. Let's just take a look at my list. We could play a guessing game here and it'd be fun because you would come up with true things that I don't know about. They hadn't built generation in forever. They had the attitude that we don't build generation in California and pollute our state. We buy it from poor people from Tennessee and Florida and, well, really in the surrounding areas of California, which is why a lot of independent power producers went out that way and started building to sell into the California market. The prices were good and they weren't going to build it. Competition would be good. Well, they re-regulated. They called it deregulated, but they didn't. You don't deregulate somebody and still handcuff them to the door. They basically required, by law, that the California utilities could buy wholesale power only on the spot market the day before they were going to sell it. So that nailed the price. So what happened is when the gas prices went out of sight, the spot market went out of sight, and they could only buy on the spot market. They couldn't do long-term contracts. And so they were paying 100 times what they were selling it for because they fixed the price to the retailer. Think about it. If you fix the price to the retailer and it gets hot, is he going to cut back? No. He's going to crank it up, his air conditioner. So there was no incentive for the consumer to cut back in peak periods. That was the biggest problem in California. If they'd have passed along the price to the consumer, they would have cut back in those peak periods. And probably could have avoided this with that, a modest rate increase, and allowing them to fix long-term contracts. If you'd had those three things, according to the chief operating officer of that company, he said, if we had been able to have long-term contracts, a modest rate increase, and had some incentive for the consumer to not consume during peak periods, we wouldn't be here. Isn't that interesting? And by the way, whoever talked about environmental, a lot of their plants couldn't run because they had used up all of their emission allowances, and they had to shut down. That's interesting. When you look at all these things, so many of them are easy to fix. You can, by regulation, fix that. You can fix that with longer-term contracts anyway. I can't fix that necessarily, except if the demand doesn't go up for gas for some other reason because you have diversity of fuel, then the gas price isn't going to be as high either. They also had a drought, and then nobody wants to build out there because of all the regulation. They owed us at one time $400 million. I think they've whittled it down to close to $200 and probably will not pay it. We may have written it off. So it caused our stock price to decrease. It really caused their stock price to decrease. And they haven't solved this issue yet. Why am I talking about this in nuclear? There have been several news articles written about California talking about nuclear. Why are they interested in nuclear? Clean air. It's environmentally friendly, and they care about the environment more than probably anybody else. And it's there. How about the price of nuclear fuel? How does it vary? It's almost a straight line for the past 10 years, which says it's beat inflation. It's become cheaper, all things considered, and very stable. It's not subject to wild fluctuation like gas prices. So you get stability and diversity of fuel. You get environmentally friendly. And it's cost effective now. Let's talk about employment for new graduates. What's the challenge? What are the opportunities? I want to go to opportunities first. I think there's huge opportunity for you in nuclear power, far beyond what I thought 2 years ago. I think people just in the next few years, probably 5 years, somebody's going to break the barrier and build. And when they do, I think there's going to be a lot of doors. You know, there's something like 35 or 40 units being built around the world, none in the U.S. So it isn't like nuclear power not on the rise in the world. It is. There's either almost 40 units that are either ordered or under construction around the world. And that's going to kick back off in the United States. It's just got to, when you think about all these things. And California is a great case study to look at to kind of convince yourself. So I think there are big opportunities for you. And another opportunity for you is the aging workforce. Yeah, there are difficulties to come into a place that hadn't hired for a long time, and now they're hiring. And one of the difficulties is fitting in with a new employer. Another difficulty is there's not a lot of people that are young like you, a lot of peers. But on the other hand, there's huge opportunity. There's less competition for what comes down the road. And particularly if people life extend, which we're going to life extend all our plants, which extends the employment opportunity. And then at some point somebody builds, the demand for engineers is going to go up substantially. And it's pretty high right now. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges. I think fitting in is huge, and I've already talked about that. And there's all kinds of things you can do to fit in better, and a lot of it has to do with being street smart and meeting people, finding mentors. Somebody, if it's a progressive company like we are, we will assign you mentors when you come in. Take care of you. We want to get you to as productive as fast as we can. We want you to learn as fast as you can. But the best mentors that you have are the ones that you seek out yourself by establishing personal relationships with them. You'll find people you can communicate with better than other people. And the burden is on you to really find your lifelong mentors. I mean, I can just sit down and name mine for the past 31 years at Southern Company. Great people that I got to know and helped me every step of the way. And they were not necessarily my bosses, or they were not necessarily at higher levels than I was. Most of them were older than I was. And I learned all kinds of things from them, from how to deal with the labor union to how to get work done in the plant, how to do a better job in training and getting a license and that sort of thing. And they've just become lifelong friends. And that's what you have to look for, and that helps you fit in much better. I think you have to be productive to fit in. And all of that you produce may not be received by those around you. And so you have to sell it. And it's very important to be able to do that. I think one of the biggest shortcomings for technical people, particularly new, young technical people going into the workforce, is they think that when they create a work product, it speaks for itself. And it does not speak for itself. You have to sell it. And you have to politic it. And that may not be something that's desirable for you because you may not like to do that. But there's nothing wrong with it. You've got to do it. And if you think about a competitive business, do they make decisions after they get 100% of the information? That's the difference between a bureaucracy and a competitive business. A bureaucracy will study a new issue until it's out of date before they do it, like a monopoly or the government. And why? Because there's no reward for taking risk in a bureaucracy. But in a competitive business, it's on the other end of the spectrum. The reward is in taking risks. So you make a decision based on 60% information. Why do you do that and take that risk?
If you've got 100%, somebody else will get to it first.
Hey, you wait till you get 62%. Somebody's probably already gone, made a decision. Of course, those risks are you can bankrupt your company, but that's the way competitive businesses go. And that's the way people produce in competitive businesses. They get something they believe in, they get pretty high confidence in their knowledge level, and they go to management and they sell it. And they politic it. I'm talking about politics in the purest sense. I went to the board to try to get steam generators replaced at Farley, and buddy, before I went to the board, I went and talked to all key board members individually before I walked in that room, because we had to make a decision on incomplete knowledge. Because what we saw around the world told us that the deterioration rate was going to accelerate, although the data was against that. And sure enough, it did. We barely made it to the end of life on our steam generators. The board bought it. But that's the way competitive businesses are. Your intuition is a product of your education and your experience and your knowledge. Use it. Believe it. Can't tell you how many times I've inquired into things, moved on things, just based on my intuition. It's a very valuable thing. Trust it. Personal and professional relationships are very important. And I don't mean manipulative relationships, where you get to know the maintenance foreman, you get to know the operations superintendent, you get to know the plant manager, you get to know key peers, you get to know people outside your plant and the rest of your company, you get to know people in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, personally and professionally. You will learn a lot, and whenever you need something, you will have credibility when you really need it. Very important to build those relationships. Teams, I think this relates back to my work speaks for itself, but it's so important to be a team player. If you come in as an individual contributor and that's all you want to do, you're going to have a really, really difficult time in a competitive business. Work on being a team player. Man, management loves a team player. And those are the people who learn leadership skills, are the team players. There are very few isolated individual contributors in our business. Personal appearance. Why did I bring this up? Just a hint, man. Pick out a role model and dress like them. Somebody who's very influential, who looks nice, and dress like them. And take care of yourself from a health point of view. You take care of your health, your employer will have a high degree of respect for you because you have a high degree of respect for yourself. If you smoke, can it. Get rid of it. It'll ruin you. That's the one thing in my life that I wish I'd never done, is smoke a cigarette. And I know you're surprised that I give you this kind of advice in a seminar. But those are important things. And they mean a lot to your employer. Diversity is major. And I don't mean racial, sexual diversity. I'm talking about learn to establish relationships with people who are not like you. If you only establish business relationships with people who have your same personality, like to play the sports that you play, like to watch the TV shows that you play, you're going to be very limited. You'll learn so much more and be so much broader if you establish relationships with people who are not like you in the business world. It'll broaden you in a tremendous fashion. Listening. Anybody ever heard of Stephen Covey? Read chapter 5. Just read it. It can make a difference in your life. It has to do with techniques on how to listen to people, not just what they say, but to try to explore what they mean as they're talking. Because most people who are engaged in dynamic conversation that's emotional, they can't, because they're emotionally involved, they can't clearly express the issue. They don't clearly understand it. So you have to kind of get inside their mind and understand what they mean, not just what they say. That's a great chapter to read. Everybody should read that. And try it. Try to practice it. It's very difficult. Trial lawyers are masters, absolute masters at that. And self-improvement. Always think about improving yourself. Always. And not just taking a course. That's good. You improve yourself by learning to make relationships with people who are different from you. That's one method. The best method I know for self-improvement is simply feedback. Why? You can't see yourself. You don't know about the Johari window. It says you have 4 aspects to your personality. One of them you see and so does everybody else, one quadrant. One quadrant you see, nobody else sees. In one quadrant, everybody else sees, you ain't got a clue. And there's that Jeffrey Dahmer quadrant. Hopefully it's extremely small, which you don't see and nobody else does unless you get really hacked off. You can learn so much about improving yourself if you get feedback from other people. There are a lot of techniques for that. They're painful. I do it, and it's always painful. But it's really worthwhile. That's all I've got to say. Let's answer some questions. Okay. If you have it.
The floor is now open for questions and comments about Jack's presentation.
You made a reference to new plants in the future. What kind of plants will you be using? Light water reactors or gas reactors?
What kind of plants will be built in the future? I personally think light water reactors. But I know you have efforts going on here to explore pebble bed and liquid metal and advanced light water. I personally think the next one is going to be light water. However, Exelon, which owns more nuclear plants than I guess than anybody else in the United States, this is the former Commonwealth Edison PECO, their CEO is very interested in this pebble bed reactor. And it's very appealing. It's inherently safe. Or you go 6 years with no refueling. But most of the people you talk to that have tried to pump gas or metal, that's a challenge. And whatever you build needs to be able to run for 2 years. And, I mean, the pumps need to, think about pumps, they need to be able to run for 2 years without a shutdown between refueling. Because that's where a lot of people are headed, particularly the VWRs, are going to 2-year cycles. We're going to that on plant hatch. Think about rapid coolant pumps running for 2 years without faulty. That's what you got to have. And we have developed pumps that will pump white water that will run that way without a problem. All our problems are almost always on the secondary side. You know, the steam generator, feed pumps, the turbine generator, not the reactor side. What else?
I have an economic question. What is the cost of electricity, retail cost for the residential customer in your area, cents per kilowatt hour?
The residential customers in the southeast pay roughly 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And, you know, the industrials pay, you know, 3 or 4 cents. And you say, well, why is that so? And, of course, the commercial, you know, your Hardee's hamburger place, they're in the roughly 7 cents, too. It's basically, it takes a lot more effort and resources to provide power to somebody's house than it does to pump huge amounts of electricity into Dow Chemical plants. So you can afford to give it to them cheaper than you do the residential company. And in fact, the residential customers actually get a lot of favor from the Public Service Commission. So their rates are really, from a fairness basis, lower. You know, if you did it on a parity basis where you charge the person what it costs to deliver, residential rates would go up, commercial rates would come down. The Public Service Commission, they favor the voters, so they, you know, they make the commercial customer pay a little more and then the voter pay a little less. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Leon?
Percentage on nuclear, coal, hydro, each of those percentage.
Nuclear, for the core business, is roughly 20%, 18 to 20%. In Georgia and Alabama, it's 20%. Okay. And hydro is probably 10%, and the rest of it's coal and gas, fossil. Now that percentage for nuclear, as you know, is about what it is in the United States. I give you a neat thought, though. What might be a neat strategy for energy diversity in the United States for the next 20 years? Well, that strategy might be to maintain nuclear at 20%. Does that seem reasonable? You know how many plants that would take? It's something like 40 plants. It's almost like if we decided today for that to be where we would be in 20 years from now, you couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. See, this diversity of fuel is a huge national security issue. You need a blend of fuel in case you have big problems with one of them, like fluctuating costs of natural gas. Which that affects your whole economy. All of the economy is affected, in my mind, by two big things: energy and water. All the fights in the world, most of them are over energy and water. Get right down to it.
Okay. If there's no other questions, we can now turn downstairs for refreshments. But before we do that, let's express our appreciation to Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, very much. And I will send the started here.